let me first talk about the big picture of what I'm going to tell you. Over the last century, the Federal Reserve has had a lot of successes. And I'm going to focus on mainly the macroeconomic policy and the macroeconomic successes, but all of you know there's amazing successes in payment systems, community development, reacting to crises like 9/11, which I'm not going to talk about. But when you look at the macroeconomic picture, I would say that there's really two huge successes in the Federal Reserve. One is that we've had continual growth in the United States over the last century. The growth in incomes has been really rapid, and that's a key goal for the Federal Reserve. The other big success is over the century there has been a lot of stability, both in the output trend going up, in the price level, really in inflation, which has generally been low and stable over a century, and we have a better performance than most nations throughout the world, and in interest rates. So interest rates in the US tend over the century to have been low and stable. And these, production, employment, prices, interest rates, those are the goals that Congress has set for the Federal Reserve. In general, if you look over a century, we're pretty good at meeting those goals. The progress has been punctuated by some problems. We've had some serious contractions, some big deflations, and some big inflations. And what I'll talk about today is that every time the Federal Reserve has a period of great success, it's been followed by an even bigger step backwards. And I think most of the leaders, the economists that lead the system and make these policy decisions, understand this pattern. And we're really working to figure out why. The first chart I want to show you, it's a little bit of a warm-up, and it just shows you the great success of the Federal Reserve System. So this is a chart of something we call real gross national product. It's basically income. I want to make sure you can read it. So the horizontal axis is years, and each time point, that's just a decade. So it starts in 1910, goes to, we say, 2010. The blue line shows you the gross national product of the United States. That's the total amount of money, income that's being generated. The vertical axis shows you the amounts, and those amounts are in thousands of billions of dollars. That's trillions. And so that's, the bottom is 2 trillion, and then 4 trillion, 8 trillion. So you can see over the last century, when we've had the Federal Reserve, the income being generated in the United States has gone up and up and up and up. That's a great success for us. Now, the graph has gray shaded horizontal bars. These are the recessions that have occurred. And you can see kind of toward the very left of the graph, there's a really thick gray shaded area. That's the Great Depression. So that's the most severe contraction we've had. And then if you go along to the right-hand side, there's a kind of thicker gray line, and that's the Great Recession today. So you could see there was this upward trend. Incomes are always getting higher, but the incomes go up sometimes more and come down. Here is a transformation of that, where I say, what was the percentage change from the year before? So this is the growth rate. This is something that the FOMC focuses on. Every other month they have a meeting and they talk about how much growth do we have, what's the projections for growth. They're trying to always balance the growth that we have and the employment it's generating versus the potential for inflation. And what you can see is, I put a green line here at 0%. If you look, almost every year the economy is growing. Almost every year growth in incomes are above zero. But there are a few times where incomes are shrinking. And the biggest time you see income shrinking is right at the beginning in that thick shaded area. That's the Great Depression. The next actually spike down is not something to worry about, because that's a decline in incomes after World War II. But we calculate incomes kind of in a funny way. In World War II, a lot of what we calculate as income is tanks, planes, bombs, artillery shells that we were sending to Europe or Asia and then blowing up. And so incomes decline. That's mainly us switching out of this war production and into other production. The next time you get really a serious income decline in the US is starting in 2008. And we have income decline there. But overall, incomes have been growing in America. There's been punctuated by these recessions. And so it's generally an upward trend, but there's some places, causes of concern. Here's another graph. It basically tells you the same thing as the chart of gross national product. This is a chart of industrial production. I put it up for a couple of reasons. One is we don't know what gross national product was in the US before the Fed or even in the first couple of decades when we had the Federal Reserve. The measures for gross national product didn't exist. The whole concept and the idea for calculating gross national product was developed in the 1950s after the Great Depression. The first winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, Simon Kuznets, won the award for figuring out how to do this. And then they sort of back-calculated GNP to 1929. So we don't have a real measure of what the Federal Reserve focuses on today is its outcome goal. We do have a measure of something that's comparable, and this is industrial production. And so here, I chart out the industrial production index from 1919 till today. The industrial production index was created by the Federal Reserve. When the system was created in 1914, the leaders really quickly understood they needed a standard way to track the economy, so they could understand what was going on. So they created a nationwide reporting network to get data on industrial production from all 12 districts every month. And they started coming out with this. They set up the reporting process by 1916, and by 1919 they started having the data. So that's why I put the industrial production index to show you sort of the importance of the Fed in creating these measures that we use to measure the economy and to make our decisions. And also so we could talk a little bit about what happens right at the beginning of the Fed and over time. So here is the growth in industrial production from 1919 till today. And so it's just the percentage change from the year before. And then I mark out the time periods with labels that tell you the Fed's great successes and some of the Fed's the challenges that they faced. So there's 7 markers here, and the 2 blue ones tell you when World War I and World War II was. The 3 green markers tell you the periods of the Fed's great success, and that's what I'm going to talk about first. The Roaring 20s, that's the first green box. The second green box is the period of initial independence in the 1950s and early 1960s when the Federal Reserve was very successful. And then the longest green bar is a period economists call the Great Moderation, which was a period of really successful policy under Paul Volcker, Alan Greenspan, and Ben Bernanke. The 2 red boxes, they mark out the Great Depression in the 1930s, probably one of the biggest challenges that our nation and that the system has faced. And then the second red box is the inflation in the 1970s. Now, if you look at this line, the industrial production, you can see that moves around a lot more than the GNP, the gross national product, moved around. And in part, you understand there's a difference between industrial production and gross national product. Gross national product includes everything we produce in the US. And so that's industrial goods, the physical output from factories, but it's also movies, it's barbecue, it's rodeos, it's revenue from the football games that are going to go on this weekend. All of that's in gross national product. Turns out industrial production is a lot more volatile than most of the other sources of income in the US. So industrial production, if you can read the vertical axis, we have years industrial production is declining 20, 30, 40, even 50%. It's really sometimes very rapid declines and then very rapid increases. Also, if you look at this, you'll see at the beginning of the Federal Reserve, industrial production is much more volatile than it is now. And you can just look at that picture and you see that bar swings up and down. And that really is a big success of the system. The Federal Reserve was set up to deal with the volatility in the American economy, in the financial system and industrial production. For a century before we set up the Federal Reserve, we had very rapid growth in the United States. We had a lot of innovation. There was a lot of good things about that world, but that world was very volatile. So year to year, month to month, people didn't know what was coming. They didn't know whether they would have a job. didn't know if they'd lose their house, their home. Businessmen didn't know what was coming. So life was a lot less certain. There's a lot more worries and fears before the Fed. So the Fed was set up to reduce the volatility in the economy. When you look at this chart of industrial production, you can see how much volatility there was, and then how little volatility there is today in industrial production, which is kind of one of the most volatile components of income. Now I want to talk about some of these individual periods of success. The Federal Reserve was set up in 1913. When the system was designed, the US had not fought in a major war since the 1860s, the Civil War. Yeah, and I know we fought a few places, like against Spain and Cuba, but that wasn't like serious. You know, it didn't involve a lot of our country. And so the Federal Reserve was set up and designed to operate in peacetime. Of course, we opened in 1914, and Europe has gone crazy. Millions of people have already died in the trenches, and the world is at war, and the US is going to be sucked into that war 2 years later. World War I actually made the Federal Reserve look really good. So when we were set up, the Federal Reserve comes into operation and it has a bunch of goals. It's got to create a new currency called the Federal Reserve Note, and that note was designed to gain not just acceptance throughout the United States, but worldwide acceptance. Before the creation of the Federal Reserve, people never used dollars outside of the United States. Dollar was, I mean, think of an unreputable currency, like maybe in the 1970s, the peso from Bolivia, or even from Mexico when they were having bad inflation. You might use that in Mexico, but when you came home, you were converting that currency back to dollars as soon as you could. Before the Fed, that's the way people treated the dollar. It's kind of a sketchy currency. Dollars weren't issued, some were issued by the federal government, but most were issued by banks. You didn't really want to hold those things. So the Federal Reserve was set up to create a new currency, a standard currency, that would gain acceptance in the US and around the world. And the Federal Reserve Note was incredibly successful, far more successful than people ever thought it could be. In part, that was because the Federal Reserve did a great job and it was a well-designed system. But in part, it was because the rest of the world was fighting a war. And so all of their currencies, which had been backed by gold or other precious metals, they stopped backing these. They stopped giving guarantees, and they had a lot of inflation. The Federal Reserve Note looked really, really good. So during the war, when the US was at peace, the rest of the world was at war. Investors sent a lot of money here, sent a lot of gold, a lot of precious metal, and they decided to adopt the dollar. So the dollar very quickly becomes this dominant international currency like it is today. After the war, we had the 1920s. People call this the Roaring 20s because growth in the US in the 1920s was really rapid. There were some recessions. There's three contractions you can see, but those contractions were very short, and afterwards the recoveries were incredibly rapid. So some of the quickest expansion we'd ever had in the US. It was a time period where people's lives were changing, typical families were moving into the middle class. I think we call this the Roaring 20s, and when you look at the press at the time, they say the 20s are roaring because the Federal Reserve is doing a great job. And in 1927, Congress rewards the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is set up with a 20-year charter, just like the first bank in the United States, which had a 20-year charter and didn't get renewed. And then the second bank in the United States had a 20-year charter and didn't get renewed. When they set up the Fed, like the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, you had a 20-year charter. So after 20 years, they were going to go and see how good a job you were doing. And people kind of expected that the Federal Reserve wouldn't get renewed, just like the other earlier attempts at a central bank. But in 1927, because people thought the Fed is doing such a great job, Congress passes the McFadden Act, which gives the Federal Reserve a perpetual charter. Now, it's probably good they did it then, because the Great Depression is coming, and the charter of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas and the other Federal Reserve banks would have come up for renewal in 1933, which is at the trough of the Depression. And that's sort of this big red bar that comes next. And, the decision could have been different. You say, why? The Great Depression was an economic shock of a magnitude no one had ever imagined. The Federal Reserve was set up to deal with shocks, but not this kind of shock. The economy contracted very quickly. Banks failed in very large numbers. Now, most of the financial problems started within financial institutions that were not members of the Federal Reserve System. They were not regulated by the Fed. Today, we refer to these institutions like as shadow banks. So they had a very large financial system that was not part of the Federal Reserve back then, and there was big problems. And the Federal Reserve didn't know what to do. Congress hadn't given them clear instructions about what do you do when there's problems in the shadow banking system. And some of the Federal Reserve banks stood by and did nothing. Some helped out, but just, the financial system collapsed and the economy collapsed. By the middle of the 1930s, people thought the Federal Reserve should have done things and should be changed. So there's huge changes in the structure of the Federal Reserve. And then for about 15 years, the Federal Reserve actually doesn't get to make monetary policy decisions. From 1933 to 1951, the executive branch sets the value of the dollar and the interest rates. They just tell the Federal Reserve what to do. In 1951, the Federal Reserve gets back the authority to make independent monetary policy decisions. And then this is the period there, the next green bar, the period of independence. The Federal Reserve's leaders had thought a lot about the problems in the 1930s. They had learned how to make better policy. Also, they had a lot more authority. They were given power over the shadow banks. They were given the power to set interest rates and buy types of assets and back currency with a wider array of assets. So they had the legal authority and the intellectual ability and the financial tools to manage the economy. And they do, again, a really good job in the 1950s. So this is a period of great success. But then again, the success is followed by one of the biggest failures of the leadership of the system, which is the inflation in the 1970s. And it's hard to understand why we let prices get away from us, except when you read what was written by the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors then, Arthur Burns. He keeps saying, hey, prices aren't my job. Inflation isn't our job. Someone else should handle that. He cared about growth, about employment. If the system's leaders don't care about inflation, then we've learned you can have a big problem. They print too much money, or they allow too much money to be printed, prices start to rise. So this is a period of challenge in the system. And you probably know about some of the impact of these challenges in the Dallas district. When inflation rates got so high, it was really hard for financial institutions to convince people to deposit money in their bank or their savings and loan, and for them to actually make a profit. And so for about a decade, the deposits were moving from state to state and district to district as there were innovations in the financial system where financial institutions thought they had found a way around these inflation-induced problems. And we had a lot of failures in the savings and loans and commercial banks in this district in the 70s because they thought they had found solutions to the inflation problem, and these solutions were transitory. They made some money for a while, then they lost a lot more. So the period of the success in the 50s and 60s is followed by this challenge in the 70s. The system really, I think that the leaders understand what the problem was. After about 10 years of mistakes, they know what they have to do. And then the president knows what to do. They go out and they get Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker comes in. It's great to read his bio and the comments from the minutes of the FOMC meetings when he shows up. And one of the first things he said is, it's time we have grown-up monetary policy. And grown-up meant we're going to keep prices stable. That's our first goal. We'll keep interest rates low, and we'll have successful, he thinks, more growth, more stability. And the result of bringing in what Volcker called grown-up monetary policy was a period of very stable growth in industrial production and incomes and great stability in interest rates and the rate of inflation. So it's a period that was thought of to be by far the greatest success for the system. Because you guys know we're still living with a challenge here. The system was so successful for 20 years that people, and when I say people, actually, it's probably everyone in the US, but certainly a lot of people in banking and finance got complacent. And the institutions were taking too much risk and relying too much on the Federal Reserve to clean up any messes that might arise. And that results in the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. And so, just want to wrap up. I think you can see the system has always had successes. Our success is getting, periods of success are getting more successful, they're lasting longer, growth is higher, the economy is more stable. But we know there's something that we have to learn, because every time we've had a period of success, it's followed by an even bigger crisis. And the system is going to be successful again. We're successful right now. And we don't know how long the success is going to last, but we're sure 20, 30 years from now, there's going to be some new big challenge. And we want to figure out now what that is and take actions to prevent it. Thank you.